everybody, and welcome back to the Chilluminati podcast, episode 205. As always, I'm one of your hosts, Mike Martin, joined by the Wilfred Bramble and Harry Corbett of LA, Jesse and Alex.
I know those names so vaguely. I know I've heard them on a QI or two. That's the best I got for you.
I don't recognize them at all.
This is the legendary steptoe and son duo of Bramble and Corbett, were very different personalities, which ended up undoing their relationship. But they look like they were from the 30s, 40s, maybe earlier.
Not me and Jesse, though. We're staying together forever. We're best pals.
Aww.
1912 to 1985 was Wilfred Bramble.
His life, not his career, right?
That was, I was being amazing. Honestly, if he was, that could be both his career and his life.
It's like Betty White.
Yeah, I guess so. Anyway, he's been in a bunch of stuff. Odd Man Out, The Quartermass Experiment, 1984 produced in 1954, which I've read that book but never seen the movie. And Quartermass 2. He's been in a bunch. This dude was one of the two duos. They hated each other by the end and broke up, though. So,
well, shout outs to obscure UK entertainment history. The tone that we always like to start off these horrific tales with for some reason.
It's a tone I like to start everything off with. Okay, it's just
I've noticed. Yeah,
it makes me feel like I'm at home in the UK where they serve brown food, which is my favorite. Everything over in the UK is delicious to me.
Okay, yeah, I mean I'm with you. Me too. Yeah, I like it over there.
And I could get there again if Patreon paid us enough money.
If you'd like to send Mathis to England so that he can eat all his favorite vinegary, oaty, meaty treats.
A full English breakfast is just nothing better.
Yeah. If you get my boy his beans, head over to patreon.com/ChilluminatiPod. The Boston Baked Bean Boy, we were looking on the wrong side of the ocean for his companion. It's that Heinz Baked Bean Boy that we need. He's totally straight edge.
I think that's like the Boston Baked Bean Boy cousin.
No, he's totally straight edge and he cannot tolerate spice. That's his thing.
I hate that.
If you guys want more lore posts about the beans, the Chilluminati Bean Cryptid group, head over to patreon.com/ChilluminatiPod. That's all that's over there. There's nothing else over there. There's no mini-sodes. There's no ad-free episodes. There's no exclusive art. There's nothing over there except deep bean lore. So head over there to patreon.com/ChilluminatiPod to get your premium deep bean lore today.
Roll that beautiful bean footage.
I'm trying to think of a good name for this guy, like the loyal legume.
The loyal legume?
Because beans are legumes. That's what they are.
Not legume lad? Come on.
Legume lad. Oh, there we go. Thank you, Jesse. That's what we have you on. We got legume lad and the Boston Baked Bean Boy across the ocean from one another. And the legume lad is straight edge for some reason.
Yeah.
It's got to be like Ladgoom.
Oh, he's all about the royal family and religion. So he can't be smoking that devil's lettuce.
He's pro monarchy.
He's pro monarchy, I guess.
That's the opposite of
Top
the Baked
hat,
Bean Boy.
cane, long live the king.
He's like Mike Croft Bean Boy.
At the very top, there's a few things. Obviously, most of the information we're getting here in the books are all from interviews with Ed Kemper himself. A lot of what we're learning is from him. And obviously that comes with the caveat as, hey, he's a serial killer. Maybe don't believe every word he says. However, the crimes that he described and the evidence that the police had lined up to at least prove that most of what he was saying about the crimes were true. On top of that, a quick addendum from last episode, antisocial personality disorder is not removed from the DSM-5 like I had assumed. I'm mixing it up with something. I don't remember what it was, but that's still in the DSM-5. So that's still a thing that you can get diagnosed with nowadays. And lastly, in terms of Ed Kemper, a shout out to the two main sources. Again, the co-ed killer and Mindhunter inside the FBI's elite serial crime unit. Both books absolutely invaluable in learning a lot about why this man was important and how the FBI used Kemper as a way to build their foundation moving forward when looking for serial killers. That being said, a reminder of where we left off last week, gentlemen. It was August 27th, 1964, when Kemper was 15 years old and sitting at the kitchen table with his grandma, Maud Matilda Kemper, who was born in 1897, mind you, when the two of them had an argument. Enraged, Kemper stormed off and retrieved a rifle that was his grandfather's that he'd given him for hunting. The rifle had been confiscated because he had used it to needlessly shoot animals in the past. As we learned last week, he was a man who liked to kill, torture, and mutilate animals. One of the many serial killer bingo marks, a red flag that we see many times. He grabbed that gun, re-entered the kitchen, and then shot his grandmother in the head before moving around to her back and firing twice more into her back. His grandmother's last words reportedly were, quote, "Oh, you better not be shooting the birds again."
Damn.
Before he shot her instead. So, he wasn't, Grandma. He wasn't. And for that, you should be proud. That's growth. Or it's slippage and becoming a worse character. One or the other.
I think it depends on if it's fiction, right?
Yeah, it does. This part might be fiction. We don't know because we have multiple accounts that she also suffered multiple post-mortem stab wounds with a kitchen knife. But again, it's mixed accounts on that, so we don't know if that's true. After that was done, Kemper's grandfather, Edmund Emil Kemper, returned from the grocery store, and Kemper went outside, shot him in the driveway next to his car, and then after doing that, he was unsure what to do next, so he called his mom, who told him to contact the local police, which he then did. They walked, and he waited, the cops arrived, and they arrested him at the age of 15. When he asked why he did that, Kemper simply said, quote, "I just wanted to see what it felt like to kill Grandma."
It's exactly what we were talking about last week. It's just like, there's a mindset that you can be in where you just don't see anything wrong with that.
Yeah. It's called being absolutely broken. Just an absolute sociopath. Kemper, again, as a reminder, was kept in the closet, was ignored by his family. He made friends with rats occasionally because he had nothing else. He killed a cat by burying it alive because he was mad that the cat wasn't paying enough attention to him. And all of these things the family was openly aware of and did really nothing other than continuing to do what they were doing with him anyway, which is just ignore that he existed, all while his father, who was suffering from PTSD from World War II, was just detached. He just wasn't there. And then Kemper went to prison. He was in prison for about until he was about 21. And when he left, he went to go try to reconnect with his father, who he then learned had remarried and had a stepchild and had no way to really take Ed in at this particular point. And it's here that, we also learned that Ed, while a lot of serial killers tend to maybe flounder a bit in jail, with the exception of a couple, Ed is one of those couple where he was so intelligent and so, I guess you could call it charismatic, if what you would call Ed Kemper having his charisma. But he was friendly enough and intelligent enough to manipulate himself to have positions of power within the mental hospital, including going and doing psychiatric evaluations for other patients for the doctors and nurses as a favor. Like, that's how much trust that they gave him. So it's in Atascadero State Hospital that he spent his time. His considerable intellect and cooperative demeanor aided him greatly during his confinement, and he quickly learned how to present himself as a model inmate, exploiting the psychologist's desire to rehabilitate him because they wanted this as a win as well, to take this monster and be able to actually rehabilitate him and set him free. While simultaneously, of course, he was actually just simply concealing the darker thoughts and desires that were just growing in fire and intensity in his belly. And while at Atascadero, Kemper was given a variety of psychological tests, which revealed his extremely high IQ, far above that of a typical inmate. And this unique attribute piqued the interest of prison psychiatrists who saw in Kemper an opportunity for study and potentially recovery. Everybody saw Ed as an opportunity to show them that they can do it, like an award to send out.
I think it's just because he's interesting, man. I think it's just because he's interesting. I think people are just interested in a gregarious guy and that they can't believe that he's a serial killer.
But you also have to keep in mind, too, we're looking at mental health care privatized at this point.
No.
If it is. No. So then, it's just a government facility just processing through them. But I imagine if they were able to say, hey, we healed one of the biggest monsters, they might get more funding on one side or another.
It wasn't the same as how it is now, but there was money in there. Yeah.
Yeah. No, yeah, there was money in there before a particular president gutted it. I still see them being a prize. I see them looking at him. Yes, I think you're right, Alex. There's a huge amount of interest because serial killers are kind of brand new to the public consciousness, or serial killers as defined by calling them a serial killer, not necessarily a new phenomenon in the world history. But, if they can send him out truly rehabilitated, the guy who killed his grandparents, that's got to be a pat on the back and maybe a bump in cash. I'm just speculating openly here. I'm not There's no specific details on that, but it's just something that makes sense to me, like why they all would want to push him out. However, Kemper, being young and intelligent beyond his years, unfortunately, used all of this to his advantage. He learned to mimic the behaviors and attitudes of the reformed inmates, quote unquote, while easily presenting a mask of sanity to the outside world while keeping his innermost, darkest desires quiet and nurturing them. And that's true. Like somebody who doesn't care too much, who doesn't really have any in touch with their emotions, watching other reformed inmates and just parroting them is like the simplest way to do it, especially if you just want out so you can keep doing what you're going to do.
Just to jump in really quick, just to make sure that we are absolutely correct on the privatization of...
Please, thank you.
So it looks like in the 60s and 70s, it jumped from 10% were non-federal psychiatric inpatient beds at private facilities, and it went from 10% to 35%. So
that's a huge jump in a decade. Goddamn.
Yeah. And then it just only increased.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess it doesn't give us a full answer, but like potentially, yes.
We're in like 1964, 65 era right now, but that kind of keep that thought in mind.
Mm-hmm.
However, in 1969, after 5 years of being confined, Kemper, now aged 20 and standing at a full size 6'9",
outrageous,
300 pounds.
Outrageous.
Yeah, huge.
Literally Goro from Mortal Kombat.
Was released back into society against the recommendation of the doctors who said, not only should he not be put out there, but you need to make sure he's nowhere near his mother. They don't want him anyone near his mother.
They're like, he's going to kill his mom immediately when he sees her.
They really felt like there was something, that was the core of it, and they were very correct. But the psychiatrist had concluded that he'd been successfully rehabilitated, a determination that would later come to regret, and he had convinced them of his recovery, an illusion fostered by his intelligence and charisma. His mother was less convinced, but the law had spoken, and Kemper was now a free man. And with the speed at which Kemper then commits his crimes is insane. In a 4-year time span, he kills 8 people. Just rips through them, meaning he has been just harboring this the entire time. Now free and residing with his mother, Clarnell, in Santa Cruz, Kemper appeared to be living the life of an average young man. He enrolled at a community college, began working a series of menial jobs, and even engaged socially with his peers to the best of his ability. The specter of his dark past seemed to be retreating, yet this illusion of normalcy was soon to be shattered. In the spring of 1972, the news headlines in Santa Cruz began to tell a sinister tale. Young female hitchhikers started disappearing, leaving only the chilling echoes of their last known locations behind. Unbeknownst to everyone, Kemper had embarked on a new, more horrifying chapter of his life. And that's sort of where we ended last week, because remember, he was teasing himself. He was picking up hitchhikers at random, driving them in the ways that they didn't want to go, only to go back and drop them off. All of these things were him kind of ramping up for the actual thing, seeing if he could do it, seeing how he felt when he brought them into these areas and if he still felt like he wanted to kill them. And obviously, he very much did. One of the more striking things and unsettling aspects of Kemper that we also talked a little bit about but didn't address, and we're going to talk about right now, is what also allowed him to get away with this for so long. Ed Kemper, much like John Wayne Gacy, had a phenomenal relationship with local law enforcement. He and the boys in blue were best buds. They got along so well. Despite him being a cold-blooded serial killer, Kemper was also known for his charm, affability, and these traits he used to disguise his horrifying actions. While living in Santa Cruz and working all these jobs, Kemper became a regular at a local bar called, and I don't miss the irony on this sucker, the Jury Room, a favorite watering hole for off-duty police officers.
Well, of course. Of course.
You gotta get in good with the boys.
Yeah, you gotta get in good. He knew that right from the get-go. He befriended many officers who eventually gave him the nickname Big Ed. Cops just knew him as old Big Ed.
I mean, it's easy peasy.
And during an interview, Ed actually called himself a bumblebutt. And he meant that by just how clumsy and silly he was when he was committing his crimes. Old bumblebutt Ed Kemper. That's just like... That's how he referred to himself. Yeah. So the cops called him Big Ed because he stood at 6'9", 300 pounds. He was a imposing figure. Yet he was known for his articulate and friendly demeanor. He frequently engaged in conversations with the officers, showing a keen interest in law enforcement and even expressing a desire to become a state trooper, a dream thwarted by his immense size, which exceeded the maximum height limit for officers. So there was a couple people who were curious about this, and this is true. This no longer exists, but before 1972, there was a lot of police office stations or states or whatever had a height maximum limitation. You couldn't be certain tall because I assume because of like standardized gear or something along those lines. However, there was a law passed in the 70s. It was 73 or 74, where that no longer is a requirement. However, some police stations, like some of the officers in Texas out here, have a minimum height requirement. You still have to be like 58 inches tall, I think, out in Texas when I was researching it to be able to be an officer. But yeah, there was height requirements back then, and he was simply too big. Can you imagine if Kemper got to be a cop and how long he would have gotten away with it? Are you kidding me? We may never have caught him. He might have been like the Zodiac Killer, like where he just was like a story of a man who disappeared after time. Fucking crazy.
It's not even worth thinking about. It's too fucked up.
He frequently engaged in conversations with the officers, showing the keen interest, as I said, in becoming a state trooper. And his friendly relations with the police were such that he was considered part of the law enforcement, quote unquote, family to a certain extent. That's how ingratiated Kemper became with the police. He was part of the officer family because he just was always there and easy to talk to. It's fucking crazy to me. It's like, it's insane.
What the hell does that mean? Part of the family. What does that get him? Where does he go to the barbecues? Is that the vibe?
Well, the police were way more, they would talk to him about current investigations, things that were happening now. Kemper essentially had a direct line to where the cops had suspicions for crimes, including his killings. He was able to talk to them and know where they were looking when it was happening so that he knew where not to be.
That's crazy.
That's what I'm talking about in terms of family. He was just, he was a confidant. On top of that, Kemper, beyond the casual conversations with law enforcement, he also listened to police radio frequencies, using the information to evade capture during his murder spree as well. So the dude was he knew where all the cops were. He just knew where they were and could avoid them no problem. The inside knowledge of police operations gave Kemper an advantage and helped him stay one step ahead of law enforcement. And this congenial relationship with law enforcement allowed Kemper to live a double life, concealing his gruesome activities behind a mask of amiability and charm. Even after his arrest, he continued to exhibit a cooperative and compliant attitude, but we'll talk about that when he gets arrested for the final time. His first victims would be two women by the name of Marianne Pesch and Anita Lucchesa. They were vibrant college students looking for a ride home, and instead, they met a fate too terrifying to imagine at the hands of Ed Kemper. And this would be the first crime that was the beginning of a brutal spree that would terrorize the community and earn him the nickname, the Co-Ed Killer. Kemper's method was one of careful selection and brutal execution. He would offer a ride to young women, most often students. Remember, his mom worked at the college,
right?
And then led them to a secluded area. There, he would end their lives and then violate and dismember their corpses. Each murder seemed to escalate in violence, signaling the depth of Kemper's depravity. And in January 1973, Kemper would commit his most gruesome of murders yet. However, it was the murder of his own mother that would eventually end Kemper's reign of terror. And that is what's so unique about Kemper himself is that, like I said last week, unlike, Bundy, he's one of the killers who was able to get his hands on the person he wanted to kill. Again, displacement killer, somebody who kills people that remind him or are part of.
It's like closing the loop.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. And Bundy never got to do that. So he just fucking murdered 30 some odd women. It's insane. His first victims, Marianne Pesch and Anita Lucchesa, were Fresno State students who decided to hitchhike on a fateful day in May. They were on their way to Stanford University, but were unfortunate enough to cross paths with Kemper. He drove them off to a secluded woodland area near Alameda, where he stabbed and strangled them. Afterward, Kemper took the lifeless bodies to his apartment, where he would further violate them, dismembering them in a chilling ritual. He discarded their remains in various inconspicuous locations, and when Pesch's severed head would be later discovered, it sent the first ripples of fear through Santa Cruz. His next victim would be a girl by the name of Aiko Koo. His next victim was 15 years old and a Korean dance student who hitchhiked a ride with Kemper after missing her bus. Kemper did what he did with the previous two and drove her to a remote location where he, much like Pryor, strangled her and committed necrophilia.
God damn it.
He then took her body back to his apartment where he dismembered her in the bathtub, disposing of her remains in a similar manner as his previous victims.
Jesus.
It's important, like most serial killers, Kemper was taking trophies. If you remember, if we go all the way back to Tommy Karate, that guy took his jewelry off people, took like their rings, money, whatever, and kept it all in like a box in his closet. Kemper's was to sever the heads and keep those. That was what Kemper decided that he wanted to do for some reason. And
what did he do with them?
It depends. We'll get to that if you would like, but we're going to get there at some point.
I need an answer.
You can take a guess. You could take a guess. You know what I mean? It's not pleasant. The man often committed necrophilic acts.
So he like had sex with the heads? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, necrophilic acts and some things that are just like beyond just curiosity, like taking out eyeballs and slowly removing ears and like just playing with them in a weird, bizarre way that is almost like a child curious of what he has, like a curiosity and a zero emotion to stop him from slicing and cutting and committing heinous acts on these things.
Yeah, all right.
Next would be Cindy Shaw, another vibrant student who fell prey to Kemper's dark impulses in January of 1973. She made the error of accepting a ride from the seemingly amicable giant. He shot her, unlike the others that he strangled, and took her lifeless body to his mother's house, where he hid it in his room. Later that night, after his mother was gone, he violated and dismembered the corpse much like the others, burying her severed head in his mother's garden, allegedly facing upward toward the bedroom in a twisted act of rebellion against the woman he claimed caused him a lifetime of emotional torment. So yeah, he buried the head in a way that it was looking at his mom's window.
If it works for him, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we need to understand it because it does sound cuckoo bananas to me. But like,
I'm pretty like against the killing as well. But like,
yeah. You really? Oh, you say that? Okay. Oh, that's weird. Yeah, I'm against the killing too. Surprisingly. Next up would be Rosalind Thorpe and Alice Liu. The final co-eds that would fall prey to Kemper were these two women. And keep in mind, again, this is all happening in 4 years, which is why it's very rapid. There's no cool down period for Kemper like there would be for Dahmer, who spent months in between killings or sometimes even years after his first. This guy got out of prison and for 3 to 4 years just went ham. Both students were also students at USC Santa Cruz. They accepted a ride from him, and in his car, he shot them both and drove past campus security with their lifeless bodies still sitting in his car. And like his previous victims, he repeated the very same pattern of taking them back to his mother's house, dismembering each body part one at a time with precision and tools meant to do the job now, while discarding the remains of their body in different locations scattered throughout so that nobody could find them. And if they did, they wouldn't even know what the fuck they were looking at. Which leads us very quickly to the final two murders that he would commit. The ones that would close his reign of terror as the co-ed killer and bring peace back to the town where he lived. It was the murder of his own mother, Clarnell, that signaled the end of Kemper's violent actions. And this happened on a Good Friday, April 20th, 1973. His focus was turned toward the woman he claimed caused him a lifetime of abuse and pain. He walked in the room to say something to his mom, and his mom looked to him and said, "Are you going to talk my ear off all night? I just want to be left alone." Like, she was like, "Don't fucking talk to me. All you do is ever talk to me. Like, go the fuck away." And he stayed quiet, turned, and left the room. He grabbed himself a claw hammer while she went to bed.
Jesus Christ.
And then bludgeoned her in her sleep violently. He decapitated her corpse and used her severed head for dart practice and a bunch of necrophilic actions.
Sorry, what was that?
Dart practice.
Dart practice?
Yep. He mounted his head to mom and started throwing darts at the head.
It's fucked up.
I mean, it's because it's almost like super villain in a movie comical.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. It's like what Master Shredder would do.
Yeah, like, it doesn't seem like something a real person would do, ever.
No. A lot of what he did, though, like, if you think about it, because we think of Tommy Karate, he dismembered the bodies the same way. He would take them to a tub, run the water, cut their body up, put them in a suitcase, bury them in the ground in some nature preserve. This guy was doing, the budget version of that, of dismembering them in his tub, but instead of putting them in a suitcase, he would scatter the body parts around in random fields and locations so nobody could find them. The man knew what he was doing. And by the time he finally got it, he had built up such a hatred for his mom that even killing her and taking her head off wasn't enough for him. He needed to continue to
desecrate.
Desecrate's the word I'm looking for. Thank you.
I got you.
And just kept going and going. He fucked with the body. He peeled off skin, removed limbs. He committed necrophilia with their head. Again, dart practice, all of these things.
I wonder if this has to, like, I don't want to be all Criminal Minds, but I'm very curious. Comparative to everyone else, his seems far more anger-based. Like, even after the fact, he's still pissed that they're just, like, the killing them isn't enough. The dismembering isn't enough. It's the desecration where he keeps at it.
It's like Smog
where he's
sitting
still
on his
like,
hoard of gold. You know what I mean? He's just being a fucking weird little shitlord on top of his little throne of dead people that he made.
Bundy was a more angry man because he would torture them in the woods while screaming at them about women and like how terrible they are before beating them slowly with a claw hammer.
I mean, I guess you're right. Yeah.
Then sleeping with their corpses and then going back for weeks and like spending time with their corpses and stuff. This is a singular, like the focus he has on his mother is like beyond even what Bundy had.
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to get at is, so for these other guys, right, their obsession with sexuality and women and the way women treat them.
Oh, yeah.
And all that different stuff.
Those are way hornier murders. Bundy was a horny murder man.
When it comes down to it at the end, though, after they've killed a person, after they've done whatever to the body, they kind of just like then move on to the next thing. Or, when
it's almost like they get it out of their system and they feel okay. And then they go back to living their secret lives. Like Bundy had a weird family. Like a lot of serial killers play pretend, essentially, until they slip up. Or in Kemper's case, just finally had enough.
Yeah, this dude, like, something about him, it's so hard to explain because what he's doing is, it's the exact same thing of, like, picking at, like, if I had a bottle of water and I drank all the water, and then I just started playing with the bottle of water.
Yes.
And now I'm like twisting the bottle of water. And I'm like, I don't know. It's not the same thing clearly, but there's something mentally going on there where he's taking out something within him on these people who are long dead, I have no idea what it is. I honestly don't know, but there's something different here. I'm trying to put my finger on it, and I just can't.
It's almost childish in my mind, like the way he acts and why he acts the way he does. I mean, you could say that about all serial killers, but there's something about Ed Kemper's demeanor and how matter of fact he is about it. And then the after of him playing with the bodies in a way that's, like I said, kind of not toddlerish, but still like a curious kid.
But he's not doing it in a way like,
no, he's just taking out his frustrations in like a temper tantrum.
Bundy, for example, would like lay next to bodies.
Yes,
or like,
Dahmer too.
Yeah, and they would just like, there's this weird sexual thing with the bodies. And it was, I murdered you. Like, I hate women. I hate the way women treat me. And I murdered you so that I could have a perfect vessel to be my sex doll or whatever, right? This is, I hate my mom so much that I take out my anger towards her on other women. And even when they're dead, I'm still pissed. And I'm still like, it isn't like I've liberated you from being
the necrophilia isn't horny. It's more of a disrespect
domination.
action.
Yeah, it's like pissing.
Yeah, domination. Correct.
That's what I'm getting at. Like, there's clearly a difference in the way that he sees people.
Oh, yeah.
And the way that he's going to hurt people, because it's not like a sex thing. It's like a really pissed off anger thing.
Yeah. Remember the first episode, we talked about how Kemper eventually saw women as like objects because he was so afraid of them and could never talk to them. So they just became these like meaningless things that he just played with and like used for his own purposes for the most part. It's fucked.
Yeah. I mean, this is 100%. I've mentioned this before, and I'm always going to mention it because it's fascinating as hell. That one quiz I took for that college that was like about sex robots and stuff. And it stuck with me that they asked a question like, would you think that a robot would be something that, I don't know, someone like this, like Kemper would that save people's lives? If there was a robot you could hurt? But then it would ask you questions like, what if that robot had feelings and emotions? Or at least synthesized ones? Would you still feel okay if it like screamed in pain? And I was like, oh no. I keep thinking about that, because in a weird world, it's like, maybe if a person had a machine to take their anger out on, they wouldn't take it on other humans.
But it's not a real world though, because that's you hammer on a point that's actually true to some extent already. The people who make those real dolls, they get sent back sometimes, you can or be found with stab wounds that are reminiscent of tearing open the stomach and all these things. They might already be doing, I'm sure it would actually save lives. And if that's what it takes for these people to not go out and kill, then so be it.
Yeah.
But the question becomes then, is it, and that's where you get to the different layers and why I found the study fascinating, is but if it's not a real person, is it the same satisfaction?
For some it might be. For some it might be. For some it might not be. But
then are we then training people to become killers? You know what I mean? Are we now saying
let me just put it on my organ donor, on my driver's license, is you can use me for serial killer meat. I don't care. Just let somebody cut my shit up. I don't give a hell.
I don't know. I care. I don't want to be serial killer meat.
I don't care.
But because the unfortunate thing about these people is we can't catch them until they start killing people. So if getting the doll out into some of these hands and it prevents one person from becoming a serial killer, then it's a success in my eyes, because we don't have to wait for somebody to die to learn that he's a serial killer because he doesn't cross that line.
Yeah, I also have to believe that there's 80 steps before that. You know what I mean? Maybe be a good parent.
Oh, well, yeah.
Maybe treat your kid well and raise them
Here's
right.
the thing. We don't even know. We'll never know, because, again, there's already these life fuck dolls that are getting stabbed and sent back and all these things. Right. So, it's happening now. Who knows what it's doing?
Here's my big takeaway. If we're going to stay on this topic for a minute, I'm going to say this. We should have all those robot sex dolls, mostly because people won't end up having kids. And those kids won't be raised by parents who don't give a shit about them.
Yes.
And that will stop all sorts of problems. So,
that's also a great solution, because Clarnell should not have had a child. I'm just going to say it.
No shit.
Just going to say it. Put it out there. So after killing his mother, that wasn't the end. And this is kind of a bizarre turn. And I wouldn't say turn. It's a bizarre decision by Kemper, knowing his motivations. Kemper then, after killing his mom and doing all the things he did with her head, called and invited his mother's best friend, Sarah Hallett, over to the house as a means to provide an alibi. But when she arrived, he just strangled her to death and left her body in the same room that his mother's was. And after the murders, Kemper fled the state, driving east with thoughts of continuing his murder spree. But after reaching Pueblo, Colorado, Kemper had a change of heart and walked over to a phone booth to make a rather faded call, I guess we'll call it. In the dead of night, in a dimly lit phone booth in Colorado, Ed Kemper made his final confession. His voice, eerily calm, detailed the horrific crimes he'd committed over the past year.
Wait, so his mom and the friend were the last two?
Those were the last two.
That says so much to me.
It's so narratively sound.
He started driving east with intentions of continuing, but something came over him and he was like, I'm good. I don't want to do it anymore. And so in Colorado at night, he called the cops, and the cops, knowing Ed as Big Ed, didn't believe him. They just disbelieved him, thought he was having a panic attack or something was wrong. But finally, they sent officers.
Come on, Big Ed.
Yeah, no, really. They didn't believe him. But they finally sent officers over to Kemper's mother's house, where they made the gruesome discovery that validated Kemper's confession to them earlier. And Kemper, unresisting and compliant, stayed on the line, guiding the police through the macabre tableau that he'd left behind. And the brutality and horror of his confession were almost too much to comprehend. The cold, detailed precision with which he recounted his actions painted a chilling portrait of a violent psychopath. What are you giggling at, Jesse? The way I worded something?
I hope Dean and I are laughing at the same thing. Question.
Yeah.
Go back really quick. What was that? You said some words. I think they were French.
The macabre tableau.
The macabre tableau. Yeah.
The table of death that he left behind. The list of death.
The macabre tableau.
You like that? You like that? I took French in school.
It.
I was forced to take.
I love it.
I was forced to take French instead of Spanish when I was in elementary school.
Tell.
For whatever.
I can tell.
The macabre tableau. That's all I can do.
Yep.
Yeah. What's wrong with it?
I've got no notes.
And again, his very cold and precision instructions of how he committed the murders fit exactly the bodies in the scene that the police arrived at, which is part of the reason taking in what he then further confesses to was important to the FBI and the police. So after all those things were caught, the detailed precision in which he recounted his actions, the news, of course, eventually broke of Kemper's horrifying killing spree, and the nation was stunned. The genial, friendly giant known to the local policing community as Big Ed, the bumblebutt himself, had been unmasked as a monster. And as we always talk about in these serial killer things, people are always surprised that the person who's a serial killer doesn't look like an actual monster and looks like some nobody that you would not even think twice about. Have you ever had the thought, I wonder how many killers I've passed in my life walking on the street or driving?
Probably not that many, right?
But you probably have a few.
Never once had that thought. Now you put it in my head.
Think
Never
about it
once
a lot.
have I been like,
I'm going to think about it a lot now.
Yeah, now I am.
Oh, I never had that thought, Alex.
No, I don't often think about it, to be honest with you.
Now you should. Okay. The true extent of his violent, deviant behavior came to light, horrifying even the most hardened investigators. Further search and investigation would lead to the recovery of more evidence from his murderous rampage, and the scattered remains of his victims, found in locations that he precisely described, bore mute testimony to his savagery. Each piece of evidence only further cemented Kemper's place as one of America's most notorious serial killers moving forward. Kemper's trial was, of course, a media spectacle. True crime has always been something the people have, since like the early Dark Ages, fucking loved, and this is no different. A harrowing deep dive into the psyche of a man whose insatiable violent impulses led to a killing spree that terrorized Santa Cruz, his confessions, given in a chilling detail, served as the primary evidence against him. His defense, attempting to plead not guilty by reason of insanity, presented a portrait of a man deeply disturbed, plagued by abusive family circumstances, and suffering from paranoid schizophrenia. Again, I reiterate, the paranoid schizophrenia thing is still debated about him to this day, whether he actually had that or not. I err on no, I don't think he did. He's a deeply disturbed man that was plagued by abusive family and so on. But so are so many other people in this world who just go on to live their lives, as traumatic and traumatized as they may be. Most people don't go on to murder pets and then murder other people. It's not a fucking excuse, especially if you're a man who clearly knows right from wrong. But luckily, the jury was not swayed by his argument, and the graphic nature of Kemper's crimes, coupled with his own cool recounting of them, painted a picture of a man who, despite his mental issues, knew exactly what he was doing. And in November 1973, after a 3-week trial, Kemper was found guilty on 8 counts of first-degree murder. The judge, expressing his own revulsion and the wish that Kemper would receive the death penalty if it were not suspended at that time, sentenced him to 7 consecutive life sentences. And he's still alive today. He's still up and running in that prison, still going. His final destination was the California Medical Facility, a prison that houses inmates with long-term medical and mental health needs. With the gavel's last echo, Kemper's journey had finally come full circle, from his first taste of incarceration to a lifetime behind bars. And contrary to what many expected, Kemper adapted to prison life extraordinarily well. He became a model prisoner, just as he'd been a model patient at Atascadero. He participated in various vocational programs, and as I said last week, recorded several audiobooks for the blind, putting his articulate and engaging voice to good use. Now, I'm going to give you a sample of one of those books, but I'm going to list you the 17 fucking books this man has actually done audiobooks for, and I think you're going to be blown away. The very first book I'm going to give you, he did Star Wars.
Sick.
I'm sorry, what?
He read the Star Wars book in 1979.
That's the ultimate Star Wars Old Canon Book Club crossover right there.
That was the very first one he recorded. That was his first book, was Star Wars.
Is that available?
You can probably, I think you could find it. I have a sample from a different book that I found.
That's so dark. Okay, yeah.
Look, I don't know if it's because all of these murders took place in the 70s,
zeitgeist
like
of,
late
like, that
70s
shit.
or whatever, when everyone was caught. But why we are now multiple serial killers in, where they are just obsessed with Star Wars. And I don't know what that means, but there's a correlation that is weirding me out.
I don't want to hear about Star Wars anymore in serial killers besides today.
The next book he read was The Rosary Murders. Then he read Flowers in the Attic, Web Between the Worlds, Windmills of the Gods, Dune Book 4, God Emperor of Dune.
He skipped to book 4?
That's only book 4. He only read book 4.
That's what I'm saying. He
Skipped
only
straight
did
to
book
4.
4.
That's his
He went
favorite
to
one,
4.
'cause it says God Emperor in it.
If Tomorrow Comes, Petals on the Wind, The Glass Key as a taste. Crazy. So what we're about to play is a sliver of Flowers in the Attic. I think it's the opening of Flowers in the Attic. Here we go.
Chapter 1. Goodbye, Daddy.
Oh, no.
Truly, when I was very young, way back in the 50s, I believed all of life would be like one long and perfect summer day. After all, it did start out that way. There's not much I can say about our earliest childhood, except that it was very good.
There you go. A little taste of Mr. Kemper himself reading Flowers in the Attic from the 70s.
Oh, I absolutely hate it.
You wouldn't listen to 17 more books by him in that voice?
No.
No? Oh, all right. Color me surprised. I don't know what to tell you. I was going to, binge all 17 of them after this.
Daddy?
Daddy?
You want to hear that part again?
I hate
You need to hear it
that.
one more time? Hang on. We got you.
Daddy?
Chapter 1. Goodbye, Daddy.
Goodbye, Daddy.
Goodbye, Daddy.
Goodbye, Daddy. Goodbye, Daddy.
Oh, it's awful.
So he was doing that in fucking prison for 30 years. He did that for 30 years of reading books on and off. Further investigation led to the recovery of more evidence, obviously, as he was on trial. And the trial would last 3 weeks before Kemper was found guilty on 8 counts of first-degree murder. His final destination was that facility. And the California Medical Facility in Vacaville, a place for inmates requiring long-term medical health care, has 800... It's like a nice place. It's a huge, brutalist-looking structure with 800 acres. It's stark, cold exterior. It has razor wire fences with a stark contrast to the scenic California coast, right where he could see all beyond. Inside the grim walls of the prison, Kemper quickly settled into his new life. In fact, even saying in multiple interviews, he likes life in prison. It's got structure, it's easy, he doesn't worry about anything. And drawing upon his innate charm and intelligence, he adhered to the prison rules, participated in the programs, as I said, and engaged, like last time, with staff and fellow inmates in a seemingly genial manner. And Kemper's affability wasn't his only survival mechanism. His imposing physique of 6'9" and 300 pounds made it kind of a difficult target for people who might want to do something to him. He was still a huge dude, so anybody who was going to attack him had a bit of a difficult challenge.
I'm still fascinated about the fact that the last people he killed were the people he really wanted to kill the entire time.
And it was done.
And then after he had done that, he's like, dude, prison's great. I'm not stress-free.
I'm just going to run this place.
I'm just living my life. I'm reading books. It is.
Can you see why he's so, I don't want to say vital, but so important, I guess, to how they were able to pull from him? Because he was very matter of fact. Now, whether he's telling the truth, obviously, he's a serial killer. He's
Sure.
Everything about him, the way after he got caught, he seemed like a man freed from the burden that he was carrying in a weird way. And I don't mean that in a way to make him sound better than he was as a man. But it's the mother, like you said, was
just psychologically, yeah.
Yeah, it was just
because you were saying he went off to go kill more, and then he was
then he stopped. He stopped.
You know what? I kind of did what I want to do,
I'm done.
Yeah, that's so. It is very bizarre and very weird. And then when you see what he went on to do for years and years and years and years, we're talking to the 2000s.
Yes.
What the hell was going? You just don't understand what's going on in the person's mind. I guess
the psychology behind him is it's unknowable. It makes me think of, remember Granny Nanny Doss, how her intention initially was to go back to the farm where her mom was sick and her dad that abused her was like old, and she was like planning on killing him in a way, or we think she was, but he was dead when she got there. And so she couldn't have that, and she got shut down. I wonder if in some twisted world, if she had been able to enact the vengeance on her father that she was taking out on these other men, or just taking out in general, rather, because she was killing babies, would have stopped her. Because there was that moment where she was going back, and then she was found out the hard way. He was gone. I don't know, because Kemper is like the only one off the top of my head who got what he wanted out of the displacement killer people.
Yeah, it's so twisted to think that maybe, he like clearly is a killer, clearly deserves to be in jail, all that stuff. But like psychologically, you know what? I'm doing great now.
Yeah.
It's such a weird thing to think about that. Then he's just like, I've decided to read books to the blind. And it's like, why are you doing this? How do you go from killing to, I'm going to like spend jail's lovely. I love this structure. But also the psychology of this dude finally having a structure and finally having people that are like a support system, even though it isn't a good support system, it is, the prison runs like clockwork. And so he knows he can rely on certain things in it. Psychologically, this is fascinating. I understand why he is such a big deal in sort of like
absolutely
this circle of
and an article that was unearthed in 1987 from the Los Angeles Times really shows you how much of a charmer he was, even to those who didn't know him. The article details like a blind couple who shortly before getting married made a trip to the California Medical Facility State Prison to pay their respects to the prisoners who were participating in the decades-long project of recording audiobooks for the visually impaired. And midway through the story, Kemper shows up.
Their visit here is so special for us. We get letters of thanks from our blind patrons, but they never come inside the prison to meet us, said Edmund E. Kemper, 3rd, 38, the inmate who runs the program.
Yeah, at this point in his prison life, he was running the program.
Yeah. Kemper, a confessed mass murderer, has read onto tape cassettes more books for the blind than any other prisoner. He has spent more than 5,000 hours in a booth before a microphone in the last 10 years and has more than 4 million feet of tape and several hundred books to his credit.
And that was in 87.
2 large trophies saluting Kemper for his dedication to the program, presented by supporters outside the prison, are on display in the volunteers' prison office, which has 8 recording booths, 2 monitor booths, and a battery of sophisticated tape duplication equipment.
I can't begin to tell you what this has meant to me, to be able to do something constructive for someone else, to be appreciated by so many people. The good feeling it gives me after what I have done,
said the 6'9" prisoner.
This is the exact same. This is why this stuff drives me crazy. This is the exact same as when, like, dude ate a bunch of people, then went to go live a life where people are just like, he's a good man.
Yeah.
Like, that man ate people.
Yeah, not Boone Hellman, the guy we did previous. Yeah.
It's just crazy to me but I guess that's life. Like, I mean, I don't know how to describe this, where the people go through the person I am today is not who I was 20 years ago. Right. And I wonder if the same consideration could be given to a serial killer. I don't think it should, but now I'm looking at this like,
I know.
Again, a man ate people, and then the governor is like, this guy's a good man.
Honestly, like, this is the worst. The worst thing about this is that this is like the best case scenario
for a serial killer,
for like the LA, for like the like American prison system.
Oh, yeah.
It's like there's not really like rehabilitation that we do en masse. There's not really anything. It's just that Ed Kemper was done with his killing.
And he turned himself in.
So he on his own just went to jail and just started reading books for the blind.
Yeah, it wasn't the cops who showed up like Gacy, where he had the cops show up. He just
worked with it. Nobody worked with him to do this. Nobody transferred him to a place that was good for him to like get off drugs or like, whatever. Nobody like took him out of or put him into solitary confinement. He just did this.
He went on to live the life he enjoys.
It sucks.
Honest to God, it's just confusing.
He's trading much of his civil liberties away.
Like I said, the next toe in the depth of serial killer pool. He's much more he's a little bit more interesting than the ones we've talked about because it's like a weird complexity to him.
He's like the Joker in that, from his perspective, he probably just is winning right now.
Yeah, I would agree. I think he definitely is. Obviously, he's not doing this because he's a good person, but he now gets to. Everybody who hates him on the outside has to look at the good he's done and be like, fuck, like.
Outside of his issues, which he has in his own way, his own fucked up, wrong way handled.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe he is just like,
I've always wanted to help the blind. I want to be a daddy to the blind.
But that's what's so fascinating about it is clearly what he did was wrong and disgusting and reprehensible. And, taking human life is just a terrible thing to begin with.
Right.
So you want to hate the guy, but here he is, happy and content and reading books to the blind and being celebrated. And it's so bizarre that I understand why people kind of get sucked in by him. Because I don't know the man, and I'm over here like, I need to know more. I need to know more about this guy. I just can't.
If people can look at the Menendez brothers and be like, they're innocent, then I can absolutely see people looking at this guy and being like, well, he might not be innocent, but I get why he did it. Like, no, you still not allowed.
No, there's no I get why he killed multiple people, but there is something to be said about the span of a life and the different lives we lead over the course of our existence. And that is interesting. It doesn't excuse anything he did, but it's the same thing about when like a 14-year-old shoots a kid and they send that 14-year-old to jail for 30 years. Is that 30-year down the road kid the same kid? And that's one of those things where, look, he killed a person, so clearly he must be punished in some way. But now we're talking about the span. I don't know, dude. It's complicated and weird and morally gray.
No, yeah, it doesn't excuse the actions. It doesn't excuse the mindset. It doesn't excuse any of the behavior. But it does seem to imply that we should be reconsidering the way that we
treat prisoners,
view each other.
Oh, sure.
And how our psychology works.
Yes.
Because everything that I've ever learned about psychology kind of goes against the way that we think prison works on people.
Well, yeah, it's not in the U.S. Prison is not rehabilitation; it is pure punishment in almost all regards, unless you're rich.
It's death by inconveniences and and more.
Yeah, it's like if, say, I don't know, 5 years ago. This is totally random, not at all specific. Like 5 years ago, you were in a relationship and the girl you were dating totally broke your heart, but like in the cruelest, meanest way possible. You can never forgive her. But then 5 years goes by and it's like, okay, I'm not going to get back with you and I'm not going to forgive you. But as a person, I hope you're all right. Whatever. I don't care anymore. Like that kind of thing where time moves on, people change. And like, I look at this example and I want to be like, this dude sucks ass. And he does suck ass, but here he is trying his hardest to like do something good.
He's doing what he did when he was in prison as a youth. He's trying his hardest in a way that makes him the center of attention, the prime.
He clearly enjoys being Ed Kemper, the ex-serial killer. He clearly enjoys the fact that, isn't it crazy that I'm this ex-giant serial killer man and I now read
yes, I think that's
books for the blind. But then he also is reading books
I know,
for
but
the
he's also
blind.
doing it. I know.
Exactly. It's clear that he likes the trophies and he likes the attention, but he's also the thing he's doing. It's the exact same thing when you see people fighting on YouTube or Twitter or whatever, when it's like Mr. Beast just did some insane
but he
stunt,
also did it.
And everyone's like, either we hate him because he's doing it for money or he did the thing.
It's both.
Right?
The answer is both.
You can. It's not
That's
so
the
black
real-
and white.
That's the real problem. Like,
we live in a world where money is king. In order to do
both.
something like that, you have to have money. And in order to do something like that logically, you also have to make money because everything's capital.
But then you're exploiting the people that you're filming. Like that, there's a whole level to it. But then he did help them. You know what I mean?
At the end.
It's exactly the same thing here. Ed Kemper murdered a bunch of people, and he's in jail for it.
And the man should never be released. Ever.
And but he is in jail for it, but also he's reading books for the blind, and those two things both happened, and that's
no matter what you think about the mother kill.
It.
He killed a little girl at the age of 15 and 6 other college-age innocent women who were doing nothing but doing what everybody did back then, which was hitchhike to school, basically. Like, for that alone, the man should never be released, period.
He did it, but he also did the other thing. That's it. It doesn't change. his standing. It's not about that. It's just that he did one and then he did the other, and that's simply
one good thing doesn't erase the wrong thing he did, basically.
But the wrong things don't negate the
Correct.
good he's doing
Yes.
for the blind.
They
Right?
stand apart.
Exactly.
They
Same
stand
thing.
apart.
Same thing. It's just
And
two
it's
things.
and that's what makes it complicated, and that's why I'm sitting here trying not to like get emails from people who are like, "Are you saying the serial killer is a
No.
good man?" I don't want.
Please
no.
don't send me those emails.
Yeah.
I really
Just don't
don't
send
want
them
to
to
have
me.
that
I don't
conversation with
agree
anyone.
with that either.
Just at Chilluminati, someone will read it. I'm sure. At Chilluminati Pod, someone will read it.
So yeah, the man has recorded hundreds of books, from thrillers to romance to fantasy to nonfiction. And in some, like you said, twisted, chilling way, the man who violently robbed these young women of their lives was now giving a voice to authors and stories, providing a valuable service to those in need.
That's equally messed up. Like, I'm ignoring the fact that he's bringing the blind, the fact that this guy is now the voice of multiple books, like, that's insane too. Like, that shouldn't, if I was an author, I'd be like, no,
Right.
no, anyone else but him.
Obviously, the other thing we want to talk about is Kemper's incarceration also provided criminologists and psychologists a unique opportunity to delve into the mind of a self-confessed serial killer, something they'd never been able to do before. And here was a man of considerable intellect, reported to have an IQ between 145 and 160, who was able to articulate his thoughts and motivations with clarity and precision, and this made him a subject of intense interest and study. Numerous interviews were conducted with Kemper, during which he showed little remorse for his actions. Instead, he provided a detailed, chilling account of each of his crimes, often with a disturbing level of detachment. His insight into his own behavior and willingness to discuss his violent impulses and sexual deviance provided valuable data for the study of psychopathy and criminal behavior. So you have to take, it's all coming from his mouth. But at the same time, much like the audiobooks, the information he gave them was invaluable to the way they tackle serial killers now. And that is still a value to be had. It's not the end all be all, and they still have a lot of time. I mean, cops have a hard time still finding serial killers. It still takes a killer usually messing up for them to get on the scent of them. But they are now working with a bit more knowledge in that particular point, because that's just a scary point. Harder today, certainly, but serial killers shouldn't want to be caught if they're not being driven by straight emotion. It's not that, you can get away with it for a long time. And that shit is because we just have no way to, how the fuck do we track somebody like that? Now we have DNA and cameras and all this stuff. But especially back in the 60s and 70s where it was roaring, there was no way. People just didn't come home. Right. There was no cell phones. There was no text beepers. Your daughter just didn't come home one day, and now you had to figure out what happened. And it's fucking horrifying. Well, Ed Kemper, still alive to this day, remains incarcerated at the California Medical Facility, his life a testament to the darkest depths of what human depravity has to offer. His chilling legacy continues to be a point of morbid fascination for some, a horrifying tale that serves as a case study for criminal psychology, law enforcement, and the criminal justice system. And from the outside, Kemper, the model prisoner, which he is still seen as today, seems far removed from the horrific acts that he committed. All the more surprising for those who learn that this man of kind of average being was this terrible, horrible monster. His life inside prison walls appears to be uneventful and mundane, defined by routine, rules, and the occasional recording session for audiobooks still. Yet the enormity of his crimes looms over his existence and should never be forgotten, casting a long, indelible shadow. It's the chilling dichotomy that makes Kemper's life in prison a study in contrasts. The man who once haunted the coasts of California, spreading fear, death, now resides quietly within the confines of a prison, an unnerving symbol of the monstrous capacity that can lurk beneath the veneer normalcy of any human. This dichotomy serves as a grim reminder of the dualities of human nature and the terrifying destruction that can be unleashed when these dualities collide. And now you can listen to his voice whenever you want. That brings us to the end.
Also, he says daddy gross.
And he says daddy gross.
Says daddy gross.
All of that brings us to the end of the two-part series that is Ed Kemper. I was able to stick to 2 parts as promised. You did it. I'm proud. I didn't go to 3 or 4.
2023 Slim Boys.
Yeah. And Ed
never ever overlong outliving its welcome type series anymore. No more.
No more. I promise. And now you boys are your first step toward the deep end of the serial killer true crime pool.
Is that what's up? We're going deep after this? You're going deeper and deeper?
Well, we're going to slowly go deep. We still got like Herbert Mullen to talk about, as we were talking about off camera. We've got H.H. Holmes, which has to happen because that's just like insane.
Jesse, please do not read about
that is gonna. I'm gonna have so much fun talking about H.H. Holmes.
It will be worth you reacting to that line.
It really will be.
Also, if you missed it last time on the mini-sode, episode 1, White Woman, Red Stone, episode 2 of Giuseppe La Rosa and the Order of Mianaya is the seance is today at patreon.com/ChilluminatiPod in the mini-sode, so don't miss it.
Oh, shit. All right, I'm excited. And next week, it's a guest episode, everybody. The return of Krendor is next week.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. However,
you said no,
this
my
is not
God.
going to be in an Egyptian colony in the U.S., I promise. This is actually going to be kind of a history episode. I'm excited.
Oh, no. Oh, boy.
So come back for next week, episode 206, when Krendor crashes the podcast for a second time. Also part of the Cox and Krendor podcast that Jesse is a big part of.
Oh, my God. This guy.
You choose to spend a lot of time with this man.
Podcast.
So, yeah, he's going to come.
Last time I was here, we talked about the fact that Egyptians were in America. That's not
guarded by a single U.S. soldier.
The fact.
One single U.S. soldier.
Waiting.
I forgot about that.
On eternal
With
watch.
an M16, baby. One M16, baby.
Thank you guys so much for watching. We appreciate you. We're off to do the mini-sode like Alex said. See you next week. Goodbye.
Bye.
Oh, no.
Anyway, me and my wife were sitting outside indulging on our porch one night, enjoying ourselves. I needed to go to the bathroom, so I stepped back inside, and after a few moments, I hear my wife go, "Holy shit, get out here." So I quickly dash back outside, and she's looking up at the sky in awe. I look up too, and there's a perfect line of dozen lights traveling across the sky.